One time I watched an interview with Matthew McConaughey where he talked about how his mom never really let him watch TV, and her reasoning was that you could either watch TV and watch other people live their lives, or instead, you could not watch TV and go out and live your own life. And I've kind of been thinking about that whole concept lately, as the past few months, people have picked up my Louis Vuitton story and sort of made it their own by retelling it on their own channels and talking about it. Now, I'm not here to talk about the people making this content. It's not my place, I don't care, get your money, whatever. But I do think that it is interesting that in this context, the internet today is a lot like that Matthew McConaughey concept where you have people that are out doing, right? You have people that are making original content. Makers like us, like a lot of you that watch, make your own content. You also have people who are like the people watching TV, and they don't really make anything. They watch other people doing all this cool stuff. But the difference is you can't watch TV and then get on that TV and talk to people about it. With the internet, you can, and I think this is what's happening. And so as recently, my story has been making the rounds on Instagram and TikTok, getting millions and millions of views, pulled apart and repackaged and made easily digestible in minute-long form, as the original story takes 15 minutes to tell, I thought you guys might just find it interesting to know what happens being the source material for those sort of, I don't want to call them viral because I don't really know what the viral is these days. But it's something I've seen a lot. It's an old story getting picked up and re-sensationalized over and over again by people who have nothing to do with it. And that's fine, I guess, for use, etc. But you never get to hear what happens to the person who actually was out doing the thing. You only get to hear from the people watching the TV and reporting on it. So in this video, I want to just kind of go over what happened, because there are two distinct responses to the whole thing. The first response has been, hell yeah, stick it to the man, upcycling is cool, which I obviously agree with. And that was kind of the first wave. So one woman who has a really big following made a TikTok just regurgitating my story. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. And from that, I got a lot of attention. Now, the problem is she didn't share who I was. She used all of my footage, used my first name, but did not tell anyone who I was. So people were coming to me, and they really had this sense of discovery, right? They felt like I was theirs, which is awesome. Hello, how are you? However, they also thought that I sell these things. And if you ever want to make people mad on the internet, tell them that they can't buy something that you made or took a picture of. They do not understand. For the most part, people are very nice. But you will get some of the most insane accusations you have ever gotten in your whole life. I've gotten basically screamed at saying, why don't I value my customers, of whom these people were not. They were just people who found me on the internet. I've gotten accused of hating money. I've gotten accused of having too much money. I've gotten accused of pretending to be a small creator when I have a whole team behind me. That's the first downfall of all this. And I get it. It's the internet. You can't trust everything you see on the internet, and even the things that you can trust are usually made in a way that they can be presented in an enjoyable way. For example, it's 4 days after I filmed that last clip. This isn't even the same leather, but I forgot to say something the correct way, and I didn't want my message to get skewed. So I'm refilming it so that I can tell you in context why I think that this entire situation matters. And I think what the big issue with this sort of internet spread is that there's no journalistic integrity because these people aren't journalists, right? So if something is misreported, which in my case, the car person said that the story was ongoing, and then when her first story hit well, she had an update, but the update was a year-old video because the original video that she talked about that she used was like 4 years old. So she's not going to go back and make a correction to her story to make the lives of the people involved in the story not easier, but to just tell the story as accurately as possible to her viewership, because her viewership is not constant. She's just, when you're making that sort of content, you're just trying to grab a passerby's attention for a few seconds to get your engagement. Now, as I said, I'm only going to talk about experience that I've been through. So I do have experience with what it was like pre-internet. This is the Metro. It was the main free newspaper on the Boston train. This is from 2011, and that's baby me. I was like, geez, I've been 23, 24 years old. Now, this is about a bracelet initiative I did when the earthquakes happened in Japan. And it was reported, I believe right here, that I sold 17,000 bracelets. And the issue is that I had sold 1,700. So it was misreported. And I got a lot of emails asking, hey, where did the other like $250,000 go? This wasn't just a one-time thing. Just like this paper picking up the story, it is then picked up by a Connecticut newspaper. It was picked up by papers in Japan, but it is very similar to what happens on the internet. It's just that it's a different medium. Now, what happened with this is I contacted the journalist that wrote this story. The next issue, there was a correction that said it was 1,700 instead of 17,000. And what that allows you to do is when you get those emails from people being very accusatory, which I understand, I get it, you can send them to the correction and they see that as social proof. Even though you're telling them directly they're going to trust this source more than they're going to trust you, I guess. And the story even made it as far as Japan itself. There's another baby Eric, taken by my friend Tony. And this is the way that information spreads now. The problem is where you would have a printed magazine that has a history and an integrity. You don't have that with these aggregate social media accounts that are just looking for stories to retell for views. So if something goes wrong, they're trusted because people will see, oh, look, they have 4 million views, they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, they must be accurate. The problem is there's nothing holding them to that at all. So they don't have to be accurate. So when they misreport, unlike this, which a correction can be made, instead, the original creator is left to field thousands and thousands of emails and correspondences and direct messages, even if it's just a good thing. For example, in this case, it was a bunch of people that wanted a Louis Vuitton wallet because the original story never said that I don't make them. However, I don't make them. So I can't go to that outlet. I DM'd her. She did not respond. There's no way to get in contact with the person that's telling your story to a larger audience than you have. And then there's no way to have a public correction made when that information is wrong. And that information is often wrong because it's being repackaged to do something that the information was never intended to do. I always just want to share my leatherworking journey with you. I don't spread it further than that. I don't make shorts to try to capture a wide audience on purpose. When it's taken, repackaged, and recontextualized, it is a fun story. I get why it spread, but the way it affects the original creator can do a lot more harm than good. I was getting thousands and thousands of people asking me to make them Louis Vuitton upcycled things, and the reality is that I sold them once. I sold 6 of them 8 years ago. It's not my business. I'll make videos showing you how to do it, but that's exactly the reason why I make those videos. It's because, well, I don't want to sell this stuff. I want to sell my own creations as someone with patents, with trademarks, etc. You'll know that I've never wanted to be white noise. I don't care to do that sort of creating. But the reality is you can't go to them like a newspaper and say, hey, you need to make a revision so that people can get the proper information. Because even though I reached out, I never received a reply, and more importantly, she's not really responsible for replying to me. I understand what she's doing. Do I like it? Not particularly, but I understand that this is just someone playing the game. The real issue comes when that story trickles down, and you get people who are sort of feeding off of the people who are feeding off of the original content, making what they see as original content, and really, they're feeding off of the people that are retelling the story for the first time. So all that first type is generally, I think, in good conscience, and it sold a few wallets, but nowhere near. You would think 4 million views would get you thousands of dollars. It was a couple $100. It's really no big deal. Let her do her thing. It's fine. It's become just a fact of the internet that if you're going to put an original story out there, you have to be ready for it to be taken out of context, because that's just how it works these days. Let's go through what we're doing here. I'm obviously upcycling some more Louis Vuitton fabric. We're making a holster of sorts, and this part is going to fold and be the back part. So we have a lot of reinforcements here. This is leather. It's going to be kind of a hinge. These parts are just going to be flat, but we need it to be L-shaped. So I've put in some reinforcements. I have some natural vachetta on the back, and then that allows me to line everything with our Louis Vuitton fabric. Now we're doing this because remember, this is not leather, it's fabric. So it's not super structural, but the nice thing is if you do get glue on it, it rubs off. I've left a little strip of glue, or a little strip of leather right here without glue, so that we can fold this over on itself, making a right angle, and everything will lay properly. So in my experience, it kind of works like this, right? If your original story is the sort of the spring, right? It feeds a river. Then you have the first step of people that kind of take your story and share it. It comes out of you, it's the most pure. And then it goes into the river and it spreads. Other people see it. It's not just people that hike to the spring or whatever, However, that water gets a little diluted. A little bit of sediment washes up. You can't really see clearly through to the bottom of the river in some spots, but maybe in some spots you can. The secondary part of that equation, in this weird regurgitating creator, in quotations, economy, I forget what they're called. I guess they would be not tributaries, because tributaries feed into a river. Distributaries, I think. It's the people, so then you have a whole other system that feeds off of the original system that's feeding off of your content. Your secondary sources, they're looking for proven content, right? And that's when a product idea will get stolen. It's not usually in the idea phase. It's usually once a product has hit the market and proven to be successful, the concept is proven, that's generally when ideas get stolen, because what it's doing is it's mitigating risk, right? So where the river creators are having to find a bunch of stories, throw a bunch at the wall, and see what sticks. That's what I saw with the woman that reposted my story, got millions of views. She posts a lot of stories that don't get millions of views, but she's never really imparting her own personal take. She's just kind of just retelling the story. The secondary retelling, that's when it gets kind of wild. And as a small creator, you might see these people saying negative things about you and thinking, oh my God, I have to address this. And that's understandable. Because as a small business owner and as a creator of original content, you work really hard to shape the experience that is interacting with your content, right? Like I film my videos in a particular style, I act a specific way. It feels alien when I see my story being presented by someone who's not me. But that's part of it, right? That's part of having an internet business. That's part of putting content out online. Do I personally really enjoy that you can't just make things and make a living? You have to learn how to make content to get your things noticed? Not particularly. But if you want to play in that space, that's something that you have to make do with. And you have to have empathy for people who haven't been as fortunate as we have as creators to find something that takes up their time like our craft does for us. Now, one thing I will say about that second sort of creator is that it's a little futile trying to reach out and have conversation. And I don't usually do it, but in this case, because I was making this video about this specific instance, I did. And the problem is that when you have someone that's sort of interjecting themselves into someone else's story for the sake of content and adding their thoughts on the matter, the problem is a lot of the times you're dealing with blind confidence. And similar to faith, blind confidence is not logical. So you may try to have a conversation with the person and talk with them, but it's not going to be a conversation. It's going to be you saying one thing and them saying something else. And because that confidence is blind, meaning have a belief that they're unwilling to compromise on, even if you have all of the real world experience, it's just not going to work. And as a small creator, if you're not used to it, I'm a fairly large size creator, and I'd never seen something like that. I was in good faith just trying to be like, hey, the things you're saying in your videos are wrong. Do you want to chat about it? Because I have experience. I was met with just such extreme vitriol. It was as if I had attacked their family or taken food off of their table. And everyone's got that friend that gets a little too into TikTok and Instagram and becomes super engulfed in it, that they treat it like real life. And it's that kind of parasocial activism, I guess, but the context is missing. So it's like totally misplaced. And then you have that illogical blind confidence in that aggressive attack of the person for some perceived wrongdoing that just never happened. And I want to be clear, when I say faith is illogical, what I mean by that, I grew up in the church. I'm not talking about like faith is illogical in a negative way. Just that's by nature of faith, you have to just have faith because there is no physical proof of something. You have to believe in it. And that's what I mean by blind confidence. There's no basis to the confidence. Like there's no fact backing it up. It's just the person thinks they're right. And so that was my experience. I think it's important to remember that behind every camera, behind every reel, a lot of it's AI, but when the person's putting themselves on camera, there is a real person in there. And if you are not finding empathy in the person's situation, that would lead them to maybe make content you see as sort of unnecessary or overly parasocial and obsessive, or stuff that lacks the research. Just understand that maybe that's their escape, I guess. Maybe that's how they navigate their daily life. Things might be a little too much for them. I don't know. I try to remember that as someone who has a lot of people that watch my videos and is just one person. And people come to the shop and they're like, "Wow, you're just like a person making wallets." It's like, yeah, you can make it look really big. And so I think that at the end of the day, when it comes to that second sort of creator that's taking things personal, you have to have empathy for that person and understand that they're not just an internet number. They are a real person. Understand that maybe they're not in a life position to have time for self-comfort and feeding their inner child like we do by making things like this, Well, because it's generally pretty boring to be a leather worker on the internet, the only drama that you're going to get is whether you're using enough stitches per inch to call it fine French leather work or Western style leather work, or you're sewing by machine and calling it handmade, or you don't think it's handmade. I figured we would celebrate this little situation by making something a little spicy, which is why not only are we using this beautiful upcycled Louis Vuitton fabric, but we are making a Louis Vuitton hot sauce bag charm. This one's Italian leather, fully lined, sort of a Louis Vuitton vibe. But this one is going to be straight out of the Pharrell Western collection, except actually very usable. So let's get it all finished up. This pattern is very simple. It's just these two pieces and then a bunch of little strips. So what I'm doing is, if you've been kind of watching in the background, I made our front panel and our back panel, and all we're doing is we're making a loop for our front panel. Now this is kind of a flange, I guess, gusset. I don't really know what you would call it because I don't really know the parts of an actual case like this, what they're called. But what I'm doing is I'm using our Italian vachetta to surround our upcycled Louis Vuitton fabric so that it kind of looks like how they would do it in the factory. I've painted everything. All our edges are painted red. Well, it's not red, it's like a reddish brown. And of course, we're going to hand stitch everything, because if you're going to upcycle, you might as well make it higher quality than the original Louis Vuitton stuff, as we always do in these videos. I'm using a bonded nylon thread to hand stitch this. I'm using the Dunmore thread from Buckle Guy. It's kind of my favorite thread right now. I really love it. I haven't been waxing it lately, and it's been kind of nice. I painted all the edges up on this piece. You guys have seen me do that a million times. This is the interesting thing. So we're going to take this flange and flip it over like this. Then I'm going to glue this whole surface and around here. Now, I like to use the hot sauce bottle to mold this. I also like to put glue all the way to this joint, because when we flip this, we're going to basically glue it like this. And this glue actually does help when you're sticking it down to hold it in place while you're flipping that flange back. Now it's time to attach the bottom, and this is kind of the hardest part, but the way this is designed is just kind of a hinge. So you just have to go slow and it goes well. So I'm gonna use the hot sauce bottle. It's kind of a mold, and I'm gonna press it up into right where I want it to sit, drop back a little bit. Now the reason I put glue around this edge is because I'm going to simply cantilever that up and it sticks. There's no real aesthetic way to do this. You just kind of cut and muscle it. And once I get, you kind of tell like when the leather is set on the base, because the rest of it we're trimming off. Then we can fold it down like so. And what I do is I cut a bunch of little slits to relieve the tension, and that's going to allow me to lay that flat and use my bone folder to really set that glue on the base itself. So I've gone ahead and trimmed our little flange here. I didn't trim it all the way. I like to leave a little bit for when I'm stitching, because it'll kind of like pull, even though it's glued, it'll kind of pull the leather in, and I want a nice tight fit. So I've marked my stitches, but I haven't punched them all the way through. I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. And this is where your 1 or 2 tooth stitching chisel really comes in handy. I'm also still using the wooden handle maul from Buckle Guy. I find that it's a really nice weight for detail work like this, where you don't want to have to like go crazy swinging a hammer, but it's still controllable. Now once this is done, we just have to go around and do this stitch line, which I'll do off camera because I've stitched a lot in this video. And I'll probably do, after the filler, this will be the first coat of color, I'll probably do 2 coats with a sand in between. But since this video is long enough already, we'll pick up when this is done and add our snap closure and bag attachment, and then we'll be good to go. All right, here we go. So bottle just goes in here. It's going to be kind of a tight fit to start. Oh, not that bad. There we go. All the LVs line up. I like to do this design like this where I don't reinforce this as much as I could so that it comes up and kind of cradles the head of the bottle, just in case it gets knocked around if it's actually hanging from a bag like that. But that's going to be it on this project. I'm pretty psyched on it. As far as the rest of the video goes, I just, always want to share my real world experience with you. So, if you're out there running a leather business and you want to upcycle fabric or do whatever, what might come with the job. And that's been my experience the last couple weeks. We'll get back into normal stuff next week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.